Okay, imagine this for a second. You cut your price, thinking you're going to get a leg up on the competition. But then, almost instantly, your competitor does the exact same thing. And what happens? Suddenly, you're both making less money. It's a total mess. So, what just happened there? Well, that's not a mistake. That's a game. And today, we're going to dive into the brilliant science of game theory to learn how you can actually win just by thinking one step ahead of everyone else. All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with that classic business trap, the price war. Then we'll introduce a totally new way of thinking that, honestly, changes everything. We'll explore the super famous prisoner's dilemma, see how it plays out in the real world with something called the Nash Equilibrium, and then, the best part, we'll give you a clear strategy for how to come out on top. First up, let's talk about the price war paradox. This is one of those things where perfectly smart, totally logical choices can lead to, well, an absolutely terrible result. It seems to make sense in the moment, but it's a trap that even the biggest and smartest companies fall right into. Let's figure out exactly why. So just picture the scene, right? You're trying to grab a bigger piece of the market, so you make what feels like a super rational move. You lower your price. I mean, a lower price should bring in more customers, yeah? But then your competitor sees what you did and bam, they do the exact same thing. So let me ask you, who actually wins in that situation? Yeah, the answer, way too often, is that nobody wins. You both get locked into this downward spiral. Your profit margins just shrink, the money vanishes, and you both end up worse off than you were when you started. See, each individual move felt smart, but the collective outcome? It's a total disaster. And that's the paradox. To solve it, we have to completely change the way we think about the problem. So that new way of thinking? It's called game theory, and it is the absolute key to understanding why these price wars happen and, even more importantly, how to stay out of them. And believe me, this isn't just for some professor in a university, it's an incredibly practical tool for making smarter moves in the real world. At its core, game theory is really the study of strategic interaction. What it recognizes is that in business, just like in a game of chess, you're not playing in a vacuum. Your best move depends completely on what you think your opponent is going to do next. So the most important thing isn't just what you do, but how you anticipate their reaction. So how do we actually visualize all these complicated choices? Well, game theorists use this cool tool called a payoff matrix. Now, I know it might look a little technical, but honestly, just think of it as a super simple if-then chart for your strategy. It literally maps out every possible move for both you and your competitor and shows you the outcome, the payoff, for each of you in every single scenario. It makes the consequences of your choices crystal clear. And to really see this in action, we have to look at the most famous example in all of game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. It's a really simple story, but it perfectly captures that hidden tension between doing what's best for you and what's best for the group. So here's the setup. Two partners get arrested for a crime, and the police stick them in separate interrogation rooms. The key is they can't talk to each other. The prosecutor then goes to each of them and offers the exact same deal. You have two choices: cooperate with your partner and stay silent, or betray your partner and confess everything. Now, take a look at this matrix. It lays out every single possibility. If both of them stay silent, that's cooperation. In the top left box, they each get a really light sentence, just 6 months. But if you betray your partner while they stay silent, you get to walk free, and they get slammed with 10 years. And here's the real kicker. If you both betray each other, which is down in the bottom right, you each end up getting 2 years. So what do you do? Let's think it through from your perspective. If your partner stays silent, your best move is obviously to betray them and go free. 0 years is way better than 6 months. But what if your partner betrays you? Well, your best move is still to betray them, because serving 2 years is a lot better than that crushing 10-year sentence. Do you see the pattern here? No matter what the other person does, it always seems like betraying is the smartest, safest choice. That's what we call a dominant strategy. And that right there is the trap. Because both prisoners follow this perfectly rational, self-interested logic, they both end up betraying each other. And the result? They both get 2 years in prison. But if they had just been able to trust each other and cooperate, they would have only served 6 months. The smartest individual choice leads to a worse outcome for everyone. Crazy, right? Okay, but this isn't just some fun thought experiment. This exact same logic is what drives those profit-destroying price wars we started with. The prison might be hypothetical, but I promise you, this trap is very, very real for businesses. Let's connect those dots right now. To do that, we need one last piece of the puzzle: the Nash Equilibrium, which was named after the brilliant mathematician John Nash. It describes a situation where every player is making the best possible move they can, given what everyone else is doing. No one can do better by changing their strategy all by themselves. Essentially, it's a strategic stalemate. You're just stuck. And here's the powerful insight. A price war is a Nash equilibrium. Think about it. Once you and your competitor have both cut your prices, you're locked in. If you try to raise your price all by yourself, you'll lose all your customers to them. And if they try to raise theirs, well, you'll get all their customers. You are both locked in this stable but absolutely terrible equilibrium, just like those two prisoners who both confess. So if we know the trap exists, how in the world do we escape it? How do we break this destructive cycle? Well, this is where game theory stops being just an explanation of a problem and becomes a powerful tool for actually winning. It's about changing the rules of the game itself. So here are 3 keys to a much better strategy. First, you have to play the long game. Business is not a one-time thing like the prisoner's dilemma. You're going to be interacting with your competitors over and over again. Second, you have to anticipate. Think several moves ahead, just like a chess grandmaster. And third, and this one is so important, you have to foster cooperation. The best way out of the dilemma is to build trust. A famous and incredibly effective strategy is called tit for tat. It's simple. You start by cooperating, and then on every move after that, you just mirror what your opponent did last. It sends a really clear signal that cooperation will be rewarded and betrayal will be punished instantly. And look, this isn't just some nice-sounding idea. When a political scientist named Robert Axelrod ran computer tournaments to find the absolute best strategy, the results were just stunning. Over and over again, the purely selfish, greedy strategies that went for a quick win got completely crushed in the long run. The strategies that came out on top were the ones that were fundamentally cooperative, which proves that often, working together is the most rational, self-interested thing you can possibly do. So what's the bottom line for your business? First, you gotta resist that temptation for a quick win from cutting prices. Second, start thinking about your competitors as strategic players, not just faceless rivals. Try to understand their incentives. Third, see cooperation not as a weakness, but as a seriously powerful competitive advantage. And finally, remember this. Winning isn't about being the most aggressive player on the field. It's about understanding the game you're in and play it smarter than everyone else. So I'll just leave you with this one question. The next time you have to make a big strategic choice, ask yourself, am I just playing for this one move, or am I playing the whole game? Because believe me, the answer will change absolutely everything.